Hi and Assalamualaikum to our respected madam and our fellow classmates. We are here today to present Chapter 6, Appraisal of Electronic Records, specifically on the criteria of appraising e-records. Before that, allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Nur Adranam Timam Nazri.
Hi, my name is Nur Aina Naziha binti Jamil.
Hi, my name is Farina Hamizah binti Mustafa.
Hi, my name is Nur Shamila binti Suhaizam.
Hi, my name is Nur Itminan Husna binti Jeffrey.
And we are the students of IM1003D. So let's get started. As explained by the previous group, appraisal is actually a systematic process for determining the value of record, which will ensure that you only keep the minimum number of records necessary to meet your business and legal obligation. Failure to do so will increase the cost of doing business by clogging system and hindering accessibility. During appraisal process within the electronic environment, there are some additional factors which need to be considered, since not all records are available forever, and in fact, most electronic records only have value for a relatively shorter period of time, especially digital records. There are 11 appraisal criteria of electronic records, which consists of the level of aggregation, format, record linkage, updates, restriction on access to personal information, supplementary applications, documentation, readability, software dependence, hardware dependence, and cost. So first criteria of appraising electronic record is level of aggregation. But what is aggregation? Aggregation can be defined as accumulation or formation. Or in this context, data aggregation is a process whereby data is gathered and expressed in a summary form. When data is aggregated, they are typically gathered from multiple sources and were replaced with total or summary statistics. So as an example, you can see for the first picture and the second picture. For the second, I can explain on the second picture is that micro level data, which is all this tiny data, will be summarized into an aggregated data, or summarized into aggregated data. In case, in order to save space and keep records that have value, instead of keeping this tiny level data that might not be has a high archive value in it. So what does it need to be considered when it comes to level aggregation? So in a paper-based environment, summaries, aggregation, and statistical report are often the preferred format for preserving text records. This is because they are more readily interpreted and less voluminous than micro-level data. So what is micro-level data then? It refers to data at the lowest level of aggregation possible, generally pertaining to each case, event, transaction, and so on. It also can be defined as a unit level data obtained from a survey, census, and administrative systems. So it can be, for example, an invoice of an item purchased for the office items like pencils or notes or books. So these invoices are not really relevant to be kept in an archive, but they are very important as a transaction evidence. So instead of keeping all these tiny level invoices, they summarize all of it, like all the pencils or the accumulation total of pencils that were purchased, or the notes, or the electronic things that we bought. They kept it and summarized it into a statistic report. And this what in a paper-based environment prefer to be kept to be kept and preserved in archive. But in electronic environment, the reverse is true. The computer can easily aggregate and summarize this micro level. So these are the example of coding instructions used in a system to aggregate data that has been input. So unaggregated micro level data, that is data in original form before aggregation, summarization, or masking, has the greatest potential for future secondary analysis. So researcher might use this quantitative or qualitative data gathered by another research team or agency to be produced for different reasons and analyze it in a new way to improve the corporate. So the question is, should micro-level data or summary statistic or both of them be preserved? As when the smart computers now is able to easily aggregate or combine or summarize the tiny level data into one record, there's a question whether the archive should keep either the summarization of the data or the tiny level data, or maybe both, as to be kept in preserved in the archive. So these are the things that should be reflected on when appraising records. Now, I will pass on to the next presenter to further elaborate another criteria.
So the second criteria for appraisal electronic record is, the first one is record professional must determine the most desirable format for long-term retention. So the meaning of this here is that the job of record professional is to determine the correct format to maintain the records for a long time period of time. Maksudnya di sini bagi seseorang tugas profesional record yang profesional, dia hendaklah menentukan format yang diingini dengan betul bagi tujuan mengekalkan rekod tersebut dalam jangka hayat yang panjang bagi untuk kegunaan masa hadapan. The second one is often records exist in both electronic and paper form as input documents and output reports. So, the record format comes in two forms. For example, it can be recorded electronic in paper and also in electronic record. And also record also serve as a document input and also document outputs. The third is input documents contain an edited version of the raw data and output reports contain summary information at various levels of aggregation. Maksudnya dekat sini dokumen input mengandungi pelbagai versi data yang tak boleh diedit, dan laporan output juga mengandungi maklumat yang ringkas di pelbagai peringkat. The last one is when paper versions are available, it is important to consider how the records are likely to be used. Maksudnya apabila versi rekod kertas yang digunakan, ia adalah penting untuk bagaimana tujuan rekod itu digunakan. Next. The third criteria is record linkage. So the first one is the potential for records to link to other records or data is a significant factor in the appraisal of electronic records. So berdasarkan sentence ni, potensi record adalah ia berkaitan dengan rekod atau data yang lain kerana faktornya adalah penting bagi penilaian rekod elektronik tersebut. The second one is records linkage refers to the practice of combining data on identical or similar cases from two or more sources using common identifiers such as name, address, social security number, and date of birth, or common attributes such as sex, race, and age. Maksudnya adalah bagi pautan rekod, ia merujuk kepada data yang menggabungkan pada yang serupa atau lebih daripada dua sumber yang menggunakan pengecaman seperti nama, alamat, keselamatan, sumber yang bagi mengecamkan social nombor, tarikh lahir atau sifat biasa seperti jantina, bangsa dan umur. Next. In a paper-based environment, linkage are possible but time-consuming. The fourth one is Electronic records facilitate large-scale linkage of thousands and perhaps millions of cases because of the relative ease of programming the computer to match cases the shared identifiers or attributes. So, because it is very simple to teach a computer to match instances that share identifiers or qualifiers. Electronic records make it possible to link hundreds, if not millions of cases together. Maksudnya, electronic record ni memudahkan hubungan bagi skala yang beribu-ribu dan mungkin berjuta-juta dalam memudahkan memprogramkan komputer untuk memadankan kes-kes yang berkongsi pengecaman dan atau atribut. Dan akhir sekali, therefore consideration must be given to the existence of related data files and the exact data elements available for potential records linkage. Maksudnya di sini pertimbangan perlu diberikan kepada kewujudan fail-fail data yang berkaitan dengan elemen data yang tepat bagi tersedia hubungan rekod yang berpotensi. Next. So this is of example of record linkage. As you can see, database A is to data cleaning standardizing, and database B is to data cleaning and standardizing. Next, I will pass to next presenter.
Okay, so the next criteria for appraisal of electronic record is update. Updating electronic records and data is common practice. Like some of the organization must update their electronic record and data. Usually, they update that record of the organization. And second point, the ability to update easily affects the appraisal of the informational value of electronic records. Macam kemampuan kita update tu senang untuk kalau kita update record dekat electronic record, kita senang nak tahu penilaian macam value of electronic records. And then the content of a database may change from day to day, and the database design may determine the nature of the historical record that can be captured for preservation. Macam kita tahu electronic record macam makin hari makin berubah, jadi kita kena selalu update so that the organisation know the of electronic record. And then in appraising records that are updated, it is important to evaluate the design of the system or database to determine what types of records are available to document the activities covered by it. Like I said, nowadays the electronic records may change from day to day, so that's important. That's important the organisation update their of electronic records.
Right. Moving on to the next criteria, which is restriction on access to personal information. It is a common knowledge that a firm will keep and safeguard personal information in their record keeping system. Various safety measures offered in the electronic settings. Hence, it encourages the transitions into keeping all the personal information into the electronic one. So, maintaining personal information in electronic form has twofold impact on appraisal. Let's take a look at the first one. First, many electronic data files and records contain confidential information that documents the current status or recent past of many individuals and organizations. Some of data files can be linked with data from other sources, with the potential to provide researchers with a more comprehensive picture of an individual or organization that would otherwise be available. Records are not isolated bits of information. They have meaning because they were generated during a particular transaction or business process. So, a record makes sense within the context of the overall function and activities of the individual or organization that created or used them, since they have a relationship with other records because it makes them unique. But record creators might be reluctant to release confidential records to the archival institution in electronic form because of the possibility of unauthorized access and reproductions from unmorally individuals. So, because it was linked, easily shared, and disseminated online, there's a possibility some part of the transactions documents are not released as it contains top secret or confidential info. Hence, the record manager should look into its possible challenges and appraise based on the organization decision or how it will be handled. The second aspect would be that electronic record and data offer greater flexibility in handling restricted information. It is possible to remove names and other personal identifiers from electronic data files and record, and to produce public use or disclosure-free version of the files. When such techniques are employed, disclosure-free files may permit access to information that would not otherwise be made available. So, appraisal should take into account the impact of restriction on access, especially when the restrictions vary among different versions or formats of the same body of information. To put into perspective, some documents may not be deemed as confidential and should be counted as a public use or can be viewed by the public. However, some bits of personal information or classified information in the records may turn such the document into a restricted one. Even so, many systems nowadays enable removal of those information from the e-records. And this opens choices into making these two versions of the same information to be produced into a public use or disclosure version of the files. But how will this file or records be maintained and for how long? So here we see an example of a pop-up from the system, from the electronic system, which means shows the document properties. This here it shows the document restriction summary on the red box ones, and it shows what users are the ones to able to access to these documents are allowed to do. For example, in this particular document, users are not allowed to print, change the document, or assemble it, or copying it, or even extract some part of the data from the documents. But they are allowed to comment on it, file the form on the fields that the documents has been provided, and sign on the documents or creation of template pages. So these are examples of the documents that has been restricted onto some certain of action only. As you can see on the pages on the figure 5.1, we can see the flow or overflow and how the electronic documents will be created, captured, processed, and managed, stored, and delivered to be accessed by authorized persons and destroyed in the end if there were no archival value in it. So as you can see, when the appraisal must be done, the appraisal must be done on the before the documents has been captured actually. So appraisal done, so appraisal were chosen, and then it will be captured into the system, and it processed and it managed. And on this managed part is when the metadata input and secure access happen, and also indexing on some version and versioning, whether the information should be decided to be online or on should be decided to be on public use, or maybe to be privatized on certain authorized person only. So based on guidelines on electronic record management by National Archive of Malaysia, there have been put an emphasis on every organization or government bodies to keep the personal informations of the clients, the privacy of the employees, and even the transactions, the confidential information of the organization safe and secure in the electronic record keeping system. But how do we keep an e-record safe? It is by control access to documents, which is by putting encryptions, password protection, and using firewalls. or by implementing an anti-theft software, which helps you to track the stolen device or remote wipe off the confidential records. And also by lock the record itself by allowing read-only documents, so that for example an employee of certain organization and only allowed to read only the document, and in order to avoid any type of alterations or maybe any changes to the documents or any kind of destruction of the evidence of the document itself. So as I extracted from the guideline of the electronic record management by National Archive of Malaysia, they demand the public officers should address the following considerations when employing security and authentication practice and protocol to electronic records. So you can stop the video to read this and understand the importance and how can all this documentation should be appraised, and which type of record should be kept safe, should be encrypted before they've been shown to the public or be used by certain authorized person. So then I would like to show you guys a video where a discussion of a confidentiality in public records.
Hey Colin, how's it going? You look troubled. What's up?
I'm supposed to produce a video about public records that contain confidential information, but I don't know where to start.
How about by asking, is confidentiality a reason not to make records available?
Well, it can be, can't it? I mean, GS 13212 lists various criteria that constitute confidential information, and many of those are going to be found in archival materials.
True. Especially personally identifiable information such as names combined with electronic signatures, social security numbers, or driver's license numbers.
Then there's also federal statutes that declare records confidential, such as the Health Insurance, Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, or the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, covering medical and student records at the federal level.
But then there are things you think were confidential but aren't. These include employee histories, salary information, and promotion information.
Which is why newspapers can publish them.
Exactly. You're also going to have to cover instances where confidential and non-confidential information will occur within a document. For example, someone's social security number is mentioned in a document otherwise containing non-confidential information.
I know, and to explain how such commingling is not a reason to refuse access to a document, and also that the agency is required to separate confidential and non-confidential information and bear the cost of that separation. And that separation is normally achieved through removing or redacting the confidential information from the record before public inspection. But none of that makes for an exciting video though, does it?
Well, you could provide a talking Sharpie describing its life in redacting.
You're not taking it seriously, are you?
Okay, Colin, you want serious. There needs to be something about public information rather than public records. You know how just because a record is public, it doesn't necessarily follow that all of the information it contains is public.
Or that marking a document private doesn't make it so.
Make it so. Being your chance to show a picture of Jean-Luc Picard.
Make it so.
What? No. Getting back on track, I need to explain how confidential information may still be available to certain people under certain circumstances. For example, a grievance proceeding may mean parts of a personnel file come under review, or you may want to let a contractor see a blueprint for a building.
You haven't mentioned electronic records and how protecting confidentiality in them can even be more complicated.
I know, and I need something about how a deleted file will still be on a hard drive and can often be recovered through computer forensics, and how every step should therefore be taken to delete information, for example by emptying the recycle bin, and that when disposing of computers, it's essential to ensure that all information is removed and or hard drives rendered inoperable.
Ooh, this might be your chance for some Hollywood-style explosions of hard drives.
I know that's how they're sometimes rendered inoperable, but no.
I suppose instead there'll be some boring image while you explain that to protect confidential information, consider storage in a separate, password-protected location or on just one computer.
Boring, but important, as is the fact that information stored electronically is still information that's open to public inspection, and it's important to ensure that all confidential information is redacted before information is shared. And this could often be complicated. For example, marriage licenses have dates of birth, mothers' maiden names, and other information often used to verify a person's identity. And although this has often been available through courthouses, increases in identity theft mean people do not often want this information available online. And I'm also going to say that folks should consult their legal staff for advice on what should or shouldn't be available online.
Legal staff? Like Judge Judy?
No, not like Judge Judy.
You really have no sense of humor. I bet instead you'll go on and on about emails.
Again, they're important. Did you know that the general advice is not to use email for confidential correspondence? An email between offices in the same building may involve the email travelling outside the building, town, or even the country, making it potentially open to view. If you must use email for confidential information, work with your IT staff to make it as secure as possible.
Then there's human error. It's all too easy to send something to the wrong person or inadvertently include confidential information such as the office credit card number, often without realizing an error has occurred.
Or the reply all error. Remember that time you...
No need to mention that.
I'm thinking of finishing with reminding people that North Carolina is one of the most open sunshine law states, and that while there's grounds to refuse access to a record because it's confidential, you better be prepared to cite the federal or state law that makes it so. And don't mention John Luke Picard again, he's not in this video.
Well, he should be. I mean, really? That's your big dramatic finish? Can't you come up with anything better than that to end on?
There's always this. If you need further help or information, contact the government records.
Alright then, that's all the video that discussing about the confidentiality in public records. So why should the restriction on access to personal information be appraised in appraisal stage of the electronic records? Because appraisal should take into account the impact of restriction on access, especially when the restrictions vary among different versions or format of the same body of information. Next up, we got the next criteria, which is supplementary applications. So, some data files and records which lack sufficient details to merit retention for statistical analysis and research use have supplementary application in archival institution, which can use some electronic records to create indexes to paper and microfilm records in their holdings, or to develop sampling frames for selecting samples of paper records. For example, many voluminous series of case files might have automated case file usually have automated indexes called case management system. The series of case of file which has been automated or generated by the case management system must be appraised whether it is of archival values. So here are the example of an indexing applications. So you see indexing automation, where documents are scanned or imported into the system. Through workflow, documents are routed to an OCR process. Documents are routed to a document split step. Documents are then routed to an indexing step. The intelligence system is able to recognize and categorize all types of incoming documents by content type and automate the extraction of relevant index data per document type. So an example of the case management system, these two figures down here shows how the automating indexing works.
Alright, now I will continue with the next criteria, which is documentation. It is important to identify and review technical documentation to determine if it is sufficiently comprehensive and accurate to permit use of data without relying on individuals who have specialized and extensive knowledge of the system. That means when you can identify and review technical documentation, you don't need to consult or to meet any specific or any specialized someone yang profesional untuk rujuk untuk diorang. Maksudnya kita boleh buat sendiri sebab kita dah tahu teknik dia macam mana. The next point is the documentation itself is a valuable record that should be retained for the life of the system. For this point, we can say the documentation is valuable because even after many years, 5 years, 10 years and so on, we still can review it as long as it still have in the system. Okay, for this slide, what we can conclude is if some institution or organization of archival has declared some record to be permanent, the documentation must need to be transferred to archival because the documentation probably have a value. To sum up, when the data is no longer needed, it's okay, but at least we know that some data have exist once before it being disposed or missing. Okay, the next criteria is readability. Physical deterioration of storage media may render a data file of record unusable. It means the decrease of physical storage media can cause some data file or record can't use anymore. For the second point, when it comes to the observation or appraisal process, the archivist must evaluate the physical quality of the storage medium on which the data is stored. The third point state that when some data cannot be read, what you can do is by placing the tape on tape drive, and it will instruct the computer to read that file. Or another way is by testing data on other media storage with using the suitable input device. Okay, as you can see here, the left picture is a tape drive, which is the red one is the tape, and behind it is the tape drive, which when you place the tape inside the tape drive, and then you can read all the information or the records in there. And the right picture is magnetic medium. Okay, to summarize this point, sometimes problems with reading tape are most likely to occur when some data has been kept or placed for a long time, but that problems can be solved by cleaning the magnetic medium, just like the picture that I showed you previously. Alright, to summarize this slide, after the data have been read, supposedly to obtain or have a printout, which also called as a dump, from a few records in each data file. The last point is, this act is made to show whether yes or not the record layout matches the data and may alert the archivist to unanticipated technical problems.
Now, I will continue this presentation with the ninth point, which is software dependence. The need for special software to access a data file or record and retrieve information from it is a major obstacle to its transfer, processing, and distribution. Some software-dependent data sets or records are unusable if transferred to the archival institution without companion software. Maksudnya, sesetengah software dependent datasets or records seperti PDF ataupun Word, dia tidak boleh digunakan jika kita transfer atau pindahkan dia kepada archival institution tanpa software tu. Means kalau archival institution tu tak ada software yang sama macam kita, jadi dia tak boleh buka ataupun akses kita punya file. Others might be transferred if the data is reorganized into a format that does not require special software. Maksudnya, benda lain akan dipindahkan kalau sesuatu data ataupun file ataupun record tu disusun dalam format yang tak ada special software. Means kalau archival institution tu terima correspondence sebagai contoh, tapi dia tak boleh buka sebab dia tak ada PDF. Jadi dia akan tukar kepada dalam bentuk software yang dia ada, contohnya macam Word. Jadi correspondence yang diterima tadi yang telah ditukar dalam Word, dia boleh baca dan dia boleh sebarkan kepada seluruh organisation supaya semua orang boleh tengok. These are the example of evolution of Microsoft Word through the year. Macam kita pun kena selalu update kita punya Windows so that we can get the latest version of Microsoft dan boleh access files or records dengan mudah. Some software packages are designed with special utility programs to create software independent output files. In appraising software dependent files, the archivist must consider the cost associated with reformatting the data or acquiring the necessary software. An additional problem is the potential reduction of the utility of the data through reformatting. In some cases, software requirements may prevent the archival institution from acquiring a dataset. Reformatting data files into a software-independent form or acquiring the software needed to access the data greatly increases the cost of accessioning a dataset. Untuk explain tentang slide ni, record ni guna dan bergantung kepada software yang pertama. Tapi nak distribute atau buka tak boleh sebab organisation tak ada software tu. Jadi solutionnya adalah tukar format record tu, contoh dari PDF ke Word. Tapi akan jadi masalah jika info yang ada dalam record tu tak dapat dibaca atau disebabkan atas kesan software baru selepas tukar format dia. Jadi record corrupt ataupun hilang. As a result, record ni jadi incomplete and unreliable sebab record corrupted. Next is hardware dependence. Hardware-dependent files are files that can only be accessed using particular hardware. Because the computer industry is constantly changing, such hardware is likely to become rare or obsolete. Most hardware-dependent files must be reformatted for preservation and dissemination. Generally, hardware-dependent files that cannot be rewritten in a standard format on magnetic tape are considered unacceptable for archival preservation. Bermaksud, komputer semakin bertambah canggih dan asyik bertukar kepada komputer yang lebih moden. Jadi, files atau rekod yang bergantung kepada sejenis komputer sahaja dan hanya boleh disimpan dalam komputer itu sahaja, mesti tukar format dia supaya ia sesuai disimpan dan di-sharekan kepada semua jenis komputer yang ada dalam organisasi. Contoh dalam slide tu, hardware yang tidak boleh diedit atau diubah digunakan untuk simpan atau distribute pada zaman kini seperti magnetic tape adalah tidak sesuai digunakan dalam archival. Ini adalah contoh di antara hardware dan software, beza hardware dan software. Hardware adalah merupakan barang fizikal yang kita boleh gunakan. Software adalah sesuatu sistem yang terdapat dalam komputer. Ini merupakan gambar magnetic tape yang biasa digunakan di archival institution, tapi ia tidak relevan untuk digunakan pada masa kini di archival institution.
And then the next of criteria appraisal of electronic record keeping is cost. And then several factors affect the cost of accessing, processing, and preserving electronic files. The fixed cost associated with every file. The first point, the cost of archivist quality magnetic tape for data storage. Macam contoh, cost untuk archivist macam quality magnetic tape untuk data storage. And then the next point is the small amount of computer processing time needed to create a master file and security backup, which is they need time to create a security backup and master file. And then the staff needs time to prepare documentation. And then the long-term cost is for regular maintenance procedure to preserve the tape, macam cost segi masa sebab dia nak jangka hayat untuk pengurusan biasa prosedur dalam preserve the tape. And then the next point is in assessing cost, the archivist should also consider some of the potential advantage of keeping electronic record, which is archivist kena consider lah beberapa potensi atau kelebihan untuk simpan electronic record ni. And then they might compare with paper. Magnetic tape is a very complex storage medium. And then if the records require little processing and have adequate paper for And then the next point is if the record require little processing and have adequate for storing large volume of information. And then at the same time, even a small data can be expensive too and has poor documentation because they need time, so they need time to save on electronic record keeping. So the price is that data can be expensive. And then it is important to recognize that the anonymous computer files make it impossible to compare electronic record of potentially permanent variety of information in a definitive list of value. They do that because
That's all from us. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.